Welcome to Explorations. Today we're speaking with Dan Apple, who's the president and founder of Pacific Crest and a leader in the field of process education. Today, Dan is exploring with us in this fourth of a five-part conversation the distinction between developing knowledge and capabilities, and how the story of education and the changes that need to happen in higher education. Mhm. What do you think? I mean, I've seen surveys of people in the United States and what they value. Learning often doesn't even show up in the top 10 of, of values in this country. What do we need to be doing to shift that story?
Well, I fit in those people. I have never enjoyed learning,
Interesting.
which shocks everybody.
Yeah, I would say, oh my gosh, the guy who was talking about learning all the time, he doesn't like to learn.
I don't value knowledge.
Yeah.
I value capability.
Ah.
I can learn whatever I need at any time, because that's true empowerment, is if you can just in time create the working expertise you need in order to do anything you want seamlessly where nobody knows that you didn't know, versus spending any time learning something just for the sake of learning it. No, knowledge is infinite. Life is finite. For all these people who want to become encyclopedia and walk around showing to people how much they know, I go, you're wasting your life, because knowledge itself is worthless, because knowledge exists in society. It's not knowledge that you need, it's capability to perform at the expectations to produce the life that you want, so you can have the story of how you live your own life.
Yeah.
It's all about capability, not knowledge. So
Yeah.
learning is to produce knowledge, but learning to learn allows you to produce the knowledge in half the time, in a fourth of the time, in a sixth of the time, in a tenth of the time. And once you know that you can learn what you need at any point in time in your life and not slow you down, then you can go live life the way you want to live it,
Mm-hmm.
which is
I
a
love that
concept that
distinction.
most people cannot grab, because they went to 4 years of college, spent 8,000 hours of learning, and then they get on the job, and the first thing they discover is, my daughter just came back to me and said that in her first 5 months on the job, she learned more than her 4 years at college.
Knowledge. She
Okay.
had to. She had to learn.
The fact is, she went to very good schools and learned more than most people. Her knowledge base is one of the most extensive. But again, she made the statement at Christmas, I learned more in my 5 months on the job than I did in my 4 years of college.
Maybe we don't need college.
There is huge pressure out there that we have to relook at higher education, because it's higher education producing what our society needs. And there's fringes going on and say, what if we do badging? What if we just go ahead and start doing piecemeal of just-in-time learning as you need it for what you need? And what's intriguing is I'm working with a commercial outfit that is not necessarily putting college as a credential in the hiring process, because the fact is that the hiring process doesn't really differentiate someone who has that degree and who doesn't have that degree, because their income and capability doesn't look that much different.
I've got my wife's niece who lives in Amsterdam. Her son has not gone. I think maybe he's back in school now, but he wasn't interested in school. he ended up getting a job in some kind of a dot-com company, that was doing apps and all kinds of things. Moved to London, and was programming, and loving it, and and he went back to school for a short while, and it was like, God, this is boring. This is, he wasn't learning that much sitting in a classroom. So I think we really do need to rethink what education looks like, and its role in our world today. And
Yeah, well, I went to a very progressive college in the 70s at UC Santa Cruz that had no grades. I
mhm.
was able to craft my own program, and what I ended up doing as undergraduate, crafting three majors, one in mathematics, one in chemistry, and one in information science. And in that, I took away very little learning, but a whole bunch of capability. And the process learning I learned out of chemistry was just powerful. The visualization skills, the way to imagine structures, mathematics, the beauty of logical thinking, inferences, the ability to process abstract thinking, the systems analysis, the ability to design and analyze systems and create processes. It was very easy to transition to operations research, where I learned the field of problem solving and structure solutions. I mean, people for years looked at how do you structure different types of problems into different type structures of solutions, and start generalizing. So when I got to my dissertation, one of the very first processes I end up modeling was the problem solving process. And since then, I have now created methodology after methodology, which is one of the major tools in process education. And that was first breakthrough was that experiment on learners. As I described earlier, I was first order of business then. I got a group of 22 faculty members at the end of a conference, said, today I'm modeling the learning process. Thank you for staying around for extra day. And at the end of that day, we had a abstract generalized model for learning. Now that learning process methodology is being used by 50,000 educators across the country to structure active learning involving critical thinking within the learning process.
Mm.
Very powerful, and is at the heart of our learning to learn experience that we use in our learning to learn camps and our Self-Growth Institute.
So maybe what we need is self-learning institutes, and
Yes.
maybe it's a year to learn how to develop your capabilities to learn, and then now that you've got that in sort of embedded in your being, you're equipped to go out into the world, because the everything that we know today will be irrelevant in another 2 years anyway. Um,
Yeah, and I actually would like to shorten that down to almost a 1 month experience, intensive month experience, where we grow learning capability by 2 to 3 times. And our challenge still is how do we measure growth in learning performance? And I've got some experiments that I'm working on, and that in the period of time, if you cut the amount of time you give people to learn in half, but you keep increasing the learning challenges you give them, so that anybody from external look at it and compare the learning challenges you give and score them, and absolutely consistently outscore the later activities you give than the earlier activities. So now you've raised the bar on learning performance. And then finally, you have artifacts that you measure the results of learning, which has been around for a while, right? We basically, in higher education, K to 12, we measure learning all the time. Most of those instruments, I think, can be improved dramatically, and we have some of the higher level measurements for learning. And those artifacts, you now compare those artifacts from the beginning of the experience to the end of the experience, and you have rubrics to score the quality of that artifact. And you find that at the end of the process, they're outscoring significantly the beginning of the process. And you're now left with three pieces of fact. They're given less than half the amount of time to perform the learning. They are giving a much greater challenge than they were originally. And they outperform the outcomes of learning at a higher level than they did at the beginning. Can anybody refute the fact is there any way that they could have done what they done without growing their learning performance?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because learning is so complex, it can be measured. The result, i.e. knowledge, is we've actually created a 8-dimensional model of knowledge. So when you look at knowledge, the result of learning is so complex that you're now taking what's in that person's head, having them represent that in a way that other people can measure it across these 8 dimensions, and then score it to say, how do we compare one result from another result from another result? Okay, because the only way that you can really measure learning performance is then to bound the time and measure the result of that learning and do a comparison on a scale based on all 8 dimensions of that knowledge. But in doing that and doing the research, we are now convinced that absolutely we can grow learning performance in 70 hours, where if you take a 1% increase after every learning activity across 70 learning activities in that 70 hours, you get a 100% increase. But that takes in the self-assessment you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It embeds reflection where they actually start seeing the consciousness of what's happening to them. So the more they're aware of what's happening as it's happening and bring that back into the moment, the more conscious they're using measurement through the process. So they can actually see where they are now and then measure themselves and see progress. And so typically we have multiple measurements going on where they can see their own levels, where they're getting feedback from themselves called self-assessment, feedback from the facilitators, which is real-time assessment, and then peer assessment from their peers going through the process. All of a sudden, this 380, their 360-degree feedback system, well, we have it highly tuned to make the transformation that we're talking about. So I don't think we need a year. I think we need a month.
Yeah, I mean, what a great thing it would be for people to go to that institute, and whether they go to college or don't go to college. If they go to college, certainly they can. They'll go with a different kind of focus, because I think most people show up at college, the first, at the front door of college, with really very little clarity about what they're doing there and why they're there.